Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit about knives and types of knives and how you can change the blade and refresh the sharpness of the blade. Here's a range of knives that I have at home. This is the one that I recommend. It's a nice large size and it has a turn knob to lock the blade in whatever position you want. And here's a smaller version. Olfa is a very common brand name. This looks like an Olfa, but actually it's not. It's a Benchmark. It doesn't really matter who makes it. All of there's an Olfa blade in it. This knife also has a plastic turning knob. It's quite good, but it's not quite as secure, and it's not as long-lasting or comfortable as the one that's bigger, more robust, and has the brass locking knob. This is probably the cheapest of the lot, and it just has a sliding thing that goes back and forth. It's okay, but if you can use a knife with a locking knob, it would be better. This one, it has a locking slider, so when this little thing here is in the up position, it moves, and when you slide it back like that, it locks, so now it won't move. So it's a little bit better than no lock, but it's not quite as secure as the one with the locking knob that looks like this. Now, this is what a spare blade looks like, and this knife is actually at the end of its life. It's still sharp, but I'll change it. These blades have these serrations in them, and they will snap and break off at each of these serrations. Every time you break one off, you get a sharper edge. So I think what happens is you loosen this and you pull it out the back end, and there's a little protrusion that fits over this hole in the back. Take out the old blade, put in the new blade, and very carefully slide it in. Okay? And then you shouldn't extend the blade out much past the first serration like that. Now, this is quite sharp now, but because it's new, but it will get dull eventually, and in order to refresh the edge, what you do is that first serration, you bring it right up to the support label there, and then lots of different ways of doing it, but I saw Reed in the first year shop the other day breaking it off. So you grip it with pliers and break it off, but you put it under a bench so that you can't accidentally get hit, or one of your neighbors can't get hit by this piece that could come loose or a little bit of metal go flying off. It would probably also be good to wear safety glasses when you did this too. I have a clear clipboard here to simulate what a tabletop would look like. So what Reed did was he gripped it and went under tabletop and then snapped it under the tabletop so that if anything did go flying, it would be protected by being underneath the tabletop. So that's how that's one way of snapping off a blade. And then in terms of using the knife for cutting cardboard, we'll use a cutting mat, and here's my cutting mat and a bit of cardboard, and you've probably heard this before, and we'll use a straight edge, a steel straight edge, and if it has a cork back on it, it'll help it stay secure and not slide around quite so much. So hold the ruler very securely, make sure your fingers don't extend over the edge. Some people would say you hold it like this, so your nails are actually protecting your fingers a little bit. That might be a little more awkward, but in any case, hold it very securely, and make sure your fingers are well away from the edge. Then I'm going to have to move this knife up a little bit, and then we're going to go to cut. Now, since I just refreshed this edge, it's really, really sharp. Okay, that's very useful to have it very sharp, and you want to try to keep it sharp. And probably the easiest way to dull it is when you come down with the knife, you touch it to the ruler, because the ruler is steel, and it's also hard, and it'll dull the knife. So try to make sure you come beside the ruler and don't hit the ruler when you come down onto the cardboard. And then you slide the knife along the cardboard. You don't use a lot of pressure, okay? Very light pressure. Gently put it in and take, a few different strokes to cut through the cardboard like that, and then it comes free. Okay, so not a lot of pressure at all. And that's, a little bit of news and information about just the knife and the general cutting. You do have to cut towards yourself a little bit with this, but your hand, you're not cutting towards your hand. Your hand is over to the side. So as long as the stroke of the knife is coming in a direction that doesn't include any part of your hand, you're good. Okay. If you cut yourself, generally what happens is this hand holding the knife will cut this hand. Okay. It's not like you're gonna, come through and cut yourself in the body. So you can cut towards your stomach, so to speak, because your hands will break yourself. But it's this hand you have to be careful of. So always be aware of where that hand is, and don't use a lot of force. If for one reason or another you do something that does cause an injury or a cut, the more force you use, the greater the injury. So if you're using just light force and something does happen, your hand is in a bad position, the injury will be less severe. It will also be light. So try to keep that in mind. And also try to always use a very sharp blade, because you don't need as much force with a sharp blade. And that will mean you're less likely to need force that could cause a larger injury. So a sharp blade, and don't use much force. Okay, hope that helps.